lot to talk about. Jack, it's cold here. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the national economy because we have to do that. I don't know if we even have an economy anymore, but they say we do, but I don't know about that. Then I want to talk about the San Francisco Bay Area. I want to talk about real estate, what's been happening at the beginning of the year to now, what's going to happen towards the end of the year, what I think is going to happen next year, a little bit about these buyers and sellers. And then I want to kind of close by telling you what I think is going to happen over probably the next 3 to 5 years. So let's start with this national economy. You know, numbers came out today, and basically what they're saying is the Federal Reserve started out by saying that we probably would have GDP growth of about 3.5%. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that number was a little bit too high because of some of the things we've hit along the year. And so I think that number is probably going to be closer to about 2.5%. They said that this last quarter we came in at about 2.8%, which was pretty good. It was more than what they thought. You know, the new jobs number came in today. It came in at 240,000, which surprised everybody because last month we only had 140,000 new jobs, which was a terrible number. They thought because of the government slowdown and shutdown that we would not have a good number, but we did have a good number. And so I think that's why we'll probably end the year at about 2.5%. I think that when you look at what's been happening, let's talk about the stock market, let's talk about the bond market, and I have to do that in relation to what we call the slowdown of the government. Now let's go back basically to last year. If you remember last year, they set up a committee, and that committee was equal Democrats, equal Republicans, and they were supposed to sit down and basically come up with this wonderful tax plan, this wonderful spending plan. They were supposed to take care of the deficit, which is over $1 trillion, and they were supposed to take care of our debt ceiling. Well, they did absolutely nothing at the end of the day, except on the tax side. And on the tax side, of course, they raised our taxes. They raised them up to 39.6%. And what they really did was they hit capital gains. So you know long-term capital gains are at your income tax rate, but on the short-term capital gain side, what they did was they went from 15 to 20%, and then buried in the Obama health care is something called the investment tax, which says if you have an income of over $250,000 a year and you make any kind of passive appreciation, that would be on dividend stocks, rental income, interest, or real estate, that you pay an additional 3.8%. So basically short-term capital gains went from 15 to 20 all the way up to 24%. That's why when you read that our deficit, which was supposed to be this year $1.1 trillion, because we bring in $2.3 trillion in taxes, but we spend $3.3 trillion basically in what we use to operate this country. They said, oh, we're doing so much better now, it's only going to be $700 billion we're in deficit this year. Well, the reason for that is because of the extra taxes we've had. So they took care of the tax side. When it came to the spending side, none of them could agree on what they wanted to do. Nobody wanted to cut anything. So what they did is they had something called the sequester, which came into effect. That was the penalty that they had to incur if they couldn't agree on the spending side. That was something that's going to take $1.1 trillion out of spending over the next 10 years. And everybody hates it, and for this reason. Because it doesn't have any flexibility, it's very detailed as to who gets cut, what gets cut, how you get cut, and they don't like it. So we move into this year and they say, okay, we're going to try again. We're going to set up a panel, equal Democrats, equal Republicans. We're going to talk about spending cuts. We're going to talk about the deficit. We'll talk about the debt ceiling, and you know what happened. They don't like each other. They don't talk to each other. They're all running around with Botox. They're all basically mentally deranged. They're insane. They're dysfunctional. I now think we have an adult daycare center back in Washington. That's exactly what it is. They don't know where in the hell they're going, they don't know where they've been, and they don't know where in the hell they would go even if you gave them a map and showed them the way to get there. So at the end of the day, here's what happened. They did what we call the Hail Mary, you know that. They did absolutely nothing. They waited till the end when everything was basically critical, where we were going into shutdown, which is really slow growth, and a slowdown, and where they basically waited and, oh my God, they scared everybody we were going to default on our debt. Well, let's talk about it. First of all, the whole government did not shut down. Only 20% of it did, but obviously that makes a difference. It was costing us about $300 million a week and about 0.2% on our GDP. Now the default on our debt, look, we take in $2.3 trillion in revenue. The interest on our debt right now for the bonds that people buy around the world is $330 billion. So we certainly could have paid the interest on our debt. But they want to make everybody get, oh my God, isn't this terrible? The biggest economy on the world is not functioning, it's not working. So at the end of the day, what did they do? Well, they just pushed the can down the road because they said, we'll continue spending at the level we spent last year through January, and then we're going to raise the debt ceiling, which they did to $17 trillion, and we're going to do that till February the 7th. And they all breathed a sigh of relief, and everybody said, isn't that wonderful? Well, that's only about 6 more weeks because of all the vacations they're going to take between now and then. So we're going to be back in the same place we were before. But I'll tell you what is really the most amazing thing. That brings me to the stock market and basically to interest rates. Do you realize that this economy basically went into shutdown, supposedly, that we have a Congress that does not work, you have a president who doesn't know anything, he never learned, he read it in the paper, and at the end of the day, here's what happened. We had the best October in the stock market we've ever had. The stock market didn't hardly move at all. It stayed at 15,002, it's at 15,005, 15,006 now. Look what happened to basically the interest rates. They had hit 3%, they went back down to 2.6. This morning they're about 2.7 because we had a good employment number, so they ticked up, which tells you this. Basically the powers that be, the money behind this economy, doesn't care what Washington does. That's the whole clue. The stock market basically said, look, we're just going to go on and do business. We're going to have the best year we've had in the last 5 years. The bond market said, we're going to stay very gentle and keep interest rates around because you guys are all crazy back there and we don't care what you do. So now let me talk a little bit about interest rates. Let me talk about Mr. Bernanke and what's going to happen there. You know, Mr. Bernanke, who's been in here for 5 years, is leaving in January, and boy, is he running for the door and saying, don't give me a retirement party, I'm out of here, man, this is a tough job. He's the only adult at the table, if you want to know the truth, okay? So at the end of the day, they're going to write books about him, and some will say he's a hero, some will say, you know, he was the worst person that ever happened. But let's talk about what he really did. He had 2 terrible choices when he came in. He inherited the worst recession we've had since the Great Depression, and he had 2 choices. One is just to let the markets repair themselves, which means that he could have just done nothing, not lowered interest rate, not opened the spigot for free money and the sugar, and basically we would have survived, but it would have been deeper and longer. Instead, he chose to open the spigot, lower interest rates, and put us on easy money, and he did that in order to save people like GM, AIG, the banks, etc. So at the end of the day, it was interesting because when he did that, all the other countries of the world criticized him for doing that. And if you remember in Europe, instead of opening the spigot, they started out by saying to the countries that were in default, you've got to cut down on your budgets, you've got to trim down, you've got to get tight, this is ridiculous, we're not loaning you money. Germany was screaming and yelling, Anna Merkel saying, no, I'm not going to do all this. It's very interesting because now Mr. Draghi, who's head of the European Common Bank, has opened the spigot there, and he just lowered interest rates again yesterday, and he said, come one, come all. There's a lot of money here. You need money, Greece, we can give it to you. You need it once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. In Japan, they've opened the spigot there too, and they had some growth. And even China, that was at 10% last year, and oh my God, aren't you feeling sorry for them? They're only going to have 7% growth this year. They opened the spigot, they've done another stimulus, so everybody now has followed Mr. Bernanke's plan. Now what's interesting about that is, we're trying to do something we've never done before. We are trying to get out of debt by creating more debt. Now that's going to be interesting because usually that is not the way it works. If you're in a lot of debt and you sit down with a counselor, they usually tell you, stop spending, tear up those credit cards, you can't be doing this. So we're going to try this, and I figured out what's going to happen. They figure that as long as the whole world does it together, they can do it long enough that all of us will be dead before we hit the wall, so it won't matter and we don't care. That's exactly what's going to happen. So now let me talk about these interest rates, because it's very interesting what happened to them. They've continuously gone down, and if you remember in May of this year, they hit 1.6%. Now part of that was because of Mr. Bernanke, but part of it was because if you go back prior year, if you remember, people didn't like the stock markets around the world. Asia was down 20–30%, Europe was down, ours was just coming back, and so where were people running? They were running into bonds. And you know how bonds work. When there's a big demand and the price goes up, interest rates go down. And that's why it hit 1.6%. Then all of a sudden, from May to July, interest rates jumped from 1.6% to 2.3%. Now that's a huge jump over a very short period of time, and that happened because of Mr. Bernanke. Poor Mr. Bernanke goes down to Congress, and he basically is making his quarterly report, and he sits down and he says 2 things. One is, I think the economy is getting better, and everybody would have thought he said there was E. coli and everybody's going to die in the next 24 hours. And then he actually made it even worse by saying, and if the economy continues to get better, I think that probably by the end of the year, the Federal Reserve may look at doing some accommodation in the bonds that we're buying. Oh my God, you would have thought that the man basically was left of center, and all God only knows. The stock market went down 700 points in 1 week, and the bond market jumped from basically that 1.6 to 2.3%. So what do you think they did? They slapped him. He came back a couple of weeks later, and he said, well, I'm looking at it, maybe it's not that great, okay? That calmed the bond market down. We went down from 3 to about 2.6, 2.7%, 2.8, which is where we've been hovering. So what did they do? They met in September. They didn't change anything because he said, my God, if I just say it, and this was what happens, imagine if I do it. And what was he talking about doing? Nothing. He was talking about stock. Instead of buying 85 billion bonds every month, he would buy 75 billion. I mean, like, that's a big deal? No big deal, but my God, nobody wants to go off the sugar. You understand that? So now they met in October, and he didn't do anything. They will meet again in December, all right? I don't think they're going to do anything. Now, they may, because of this employment number, which really surprised everybody, because everybody thought it was going to come in way below 200,000. So they may, but I don't think so. His last meeting is in January, all right? Now, it's very interesting on who's going to come in and who's going to take the mantle, because the president really wanted someone called Larry Summers to take the job. Now, Mr. Summers, in case you don't know, worked under the Clinton administration. He's a very brilliant economist. He was the president of Harvard University. Now, he's up one day making a speech at Harvard, and you know, there's an old saying, and the old saying is, if you can talk and you don't need to follow a script, that's fine, because you're probably really focused on what you're supposed to say. But if you're following a script or a teleprompter, don't go off script, because you're going to open your mouth and put your foot in it. You know that. You just know that. So he's making this speech, and he's making a speech to all these people who are dignitaries in math and science from around the world. And he starts out his speech by saying, you know, at Harvard University, it's a very interesting thing, but there are so many more men that go into the departments of math and science than there are women. Now, that was okay to say if he had followed it by saying, and gee, what a great opportunity, and I'd love to encourage women to come into the schools of math and science. Great opportunities and great careers out there for you. Oh no, what he says is, and I think I know why that is. He says because men are so much better at math and science than women. They just don't get it. So that cost him his job at Harvard. He had to resign, if you can believe that. He goes under the radar for 5 years, thinking that everybody will forget, right? The president puts his name up in nomination at Congress, and what do you think happened? See, there's an old theory, and maybe you men should get it, and I'm sure some of you have because you've lived through it. Women never forget anything. Okay? If you are married to a woman and in 1942 you told her one night when she asked you, do I look a little heavy in this dress? And you said, well, no, not bad. She will remember that till the day she dies. And every time there is an argument, she will say to you, I remember when you told me. See, women, we never forget anything. So at the end of the day, all the women in Congress wrote the president a letter and said, don't bother sending him to the Hill, because one, he won't get nominated, and two, he probably will not be able to walk out on his 2 feet when he gets out of here, so stop it. So, of course, what did Mr. Summers do? He withdrew his name because he was terrified to go up there. Imagine having 42 women come after you. Oh, my God, that is more terrifying than anything. So at the end of the day now, the person that's going to probably be the Federal Reserve Chairman is a woman named Janet Yellen. Now, she was the Federal Reserve Chairman in San Francisco here. She is married to a Nobel Prize laureate. She has a PhD in economics. Her son has a PhD in economics and teaches in England. Now, here's what's good about it. When you sit on the Federal Reserve Board, they usually label you either as a hawk or a dove. And if you're a hawk, you like higher interest rates and you're concerned with the currency and the value of the currency. And if you're called a dove, you're much more concerned with employment and the numbers of employment and how fast the economy is moving. And she is an extreme dove. She goes to that side of the table. And so I think here's what's going to happen. I think you're going to see this 10-year note radiate between 2.6 and 2.8. It may even get to 3% probably at the beginning of the year. I personally don't think she's going to do anything until the middle or the end of next year. Because I think even though we had a good employment number, we still have trouble in Congress. We have to hit this deficit and debt ceiling again. We still have an unemployment number that actually went up today. It went from 7.2 to 7.3. You know that's not the right number. It's probably closer to 13 or 14%. So I think she is on the side of, let's just keep it going a little bit longer. She doesn't want to muck Wall Street, which is doing great. She doesn't want to muck the bond rate, which is doing great. She certainly doesn't want to muck the housing market, which is just beginning to show some signs of life. So I think that's that. Now let me talk a little bit about the San Francisco Bay Area, because our economy here is very different than the national economy. And you get all the national pictures, but you don't get much about the Bay Area here. First of all, let me give you some projections. It's projected that by 2040 we will have 2.1 million more people that are going to come into the San Francisco Bay Area to live. And that's going to create 1.1 million new jobs. Now let me tell you just about the unemployment numbers here, because they're much better than the nation. Basically, San Francisco is at 5.3%, so is San Mateo. Marin is only at 5%. When you come over here to Alameda and Contra Costa County, you're a little bit higher than that. You're probably between 6 and 8%, but you've come way down from where you were at the height of this recession. So we are having here almost an economic resurgence, not necessarily a recession. The average salary now in Silicon Valley is $175,000. The nation as a whole is at about $53,000. So you can see what we have. Now let me just give you some statistics here that will help you understand what's happening, and then I want to talk for a minute about Silicon Valley. Here's what we need to understand. When you look at basically the September statistics for real estate, just to make you feel good, we had sales that went up about 1.9%, so that's nice and that's wonderful. We're still below the peak, but it's getting better. Inventory is growing. The price point went down 10,000 from 540,000 to 530. That's the average or the medium. But you know, that could be a reflection of what's sold. But here's the good things. Foreclosures now across the Bay Area are only 3.6% of the market. They were as high as 50-some% at one time. Short sales now are 8.6% of the market. They were as high as 27% at one time. And here's the two best things. Absentee buyers, those investors that come in either individually, internationally, the hedge funds or the REITs, they're still up at 22% of our market, and all cash was still 24% of everything that was bought and sold in September of this year. Then let's look at rents. Do you know that in San Francisco now, rents on average, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, B location, we're not talking the top of the mark here, $3,300. Oakland, California is now at $2,100, and San Jose is close behind that at about $2,000 or a little more. So when you look at that number, and here's the thing that's even more important than the rental amount, look at the vacancy factors. Do you know that in each of those areas that I talked about, they are at 96 or 97% full occupancy, which means we don't have any apartments to rent to people. So we are down in inventory, interest rates are low, houses are appreciating in value, apartments are sky high, and we have complete and almost full occupancy of apartments. So we know that we're moving to a different pace. Now what everybody says to me is, oh my God, Carole, how long can that last and what's going to happen? Are we going to have another blow up? And I get a call from the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and this woman says to me, tell me about San Francisco real estate. She says, you got a bubble out there again. Oh boy, here we go again with the bubble, right? And I said to her, there is no bubble here. I said, you know, you people back there, a bubble is artificial. This is not artificial. When you have 27% of your market paying all cash, they're able, they're willing, and they're capable of buying a home. We're not having that problem. Yes, we do have it to some degree with the lower end, but obviously there's enough money here that we can sustain ourselves. I said, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a graphic, because when you talk to these people, they don't understand real estate. You do get that, because they're idiots, okay? So I thought if I gave her a graphic about the weather, maybe she would get it. So I said, you know, it's like the weather. We're going from fall into winter, and I said, in San Francisco, it gets cool, but it never gets cold. And I said, that's exactly what's going to happen to our real estate market moving towards the end of the year. And I'm sure you're feeling it a little bit. It's gotten a little bit cooler from the frenetics of the beginning of the year. And then we're going to turn around and we'll get past winter and we're going to start to get into the new season. And I think at the beginning of the year, it's going to start to basically blossom again, and you're going to have a very good year next year. Now let me tell you why I think that, because I can give you some good examples of why that's going to happen. Just think and listen to this. In the next 4 years, 140 companies are going to be becoming public or merged and acquired in Silicon Valley alone. Now let's talk about what's different between that and the year 2000, when everybody became public and they threw everything against the wall. Nobody knew how to make any money. None of these companies made money. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. They were just throwing everything out there to see what stuck. Now, here's the difference. Now you have a 50-year-old area called Silicon Valley. The first thing is you have the big mamas and papas standing there that are the anchors for these new innovative baby kind of incubator companies. So who's there? You got Google, you got Facebook, you got Apple, you got LinkedIn, you got Salesforce.com, you got Twitter, you got all of those. If you add up the cash they have, just the cash sitting on their books, it's probably close to $500 billion. Now, what are they going to do with that cash? Because it's important. They can give a dividend, which is nice for the people that basically own stock, but it doesn't increase your revenue or market share. You can buy back your stock, which makes the stock more valuable, less shares. But what they need to do is build revenue and market share. So what these companies are doing is they're going out there now and they buy 5 to 10 little baby incubator companies. These young kids that are 20, 25 years old, 30 years old, that are building applications, that are basically getting people into their companies, basically using the systems, and nobody's ever heard of them and nobody knows who they are. So let's talk about what's happening first with the bigger ones. You saw yesterday a company called Twitter that went public and went up 70-some% in its stock, right? Do you know that that company is only 6 years old and has never, ever made a profit? Are you listening to what I'm saying to you? And that they lost last quarter $68 million, the most they've lost ever in their life. Now, how does a company like that go public and all of a sudden becomes worth $23 billion and makes the 4 founders billionaires and so many millionaires within that company? Because of this. What's the difference between Twitter and Google? Twitter is a broadcast company. Think about it. It's like a news channel. It's where you get instant what's happening, short bites and bullets, a little synopsis, and everybody can see it and everybody can chitty chat with everybody. Google is a social networking site where you go with specifics with your favorites and you talk to the people you want, and you can go on and you find things, and there's all that. Now what Twitter has to do is figure out how they're going to make money, because they're trying to start with advertising now. But they have 230 million people that go in every month. That's where the value came from, and they're expanding and growing. So they were willing to basically let it go public, let the stock go up, even though it didn't make any money. Here's another one that's never made a profit in its life. Do you know that Amazon.com has never made a profit? They could make a profit if he didn't want to grow, but he uses all his funds to come in to grow, otherwise he could be very profitable. And look at where that stock has gone. Now, let's talk about the other ones that are coming, and I'll tell you why there's so much great wealth. Because what do you think happens when these companies go public? It creates money for the people that work there, who come out and buy houses and cars and buy all your real estate. Yahoo, as you know, has done 2 things. One is they went out last month and they bought a company called Tumblr. Now, Tumblr is this very irreverent tween site for 12 to 18 years old. So if you get on it, be careful, because you will not believe what they're doing between 12 and 18 years old. I didn't understand half of it, really, I didn't. And I thought I might like to try some of it. And I thought I would be willing and ready, but I can't find anybody my age that's able to do any of that stuff. Okay. So at the end of the day, what can I do, right? I can just dream about it and try to remember what it was like. I guess that's the best way I can do. So at the end of the day, they go out, this company, a 26-year-old person is the founder, a high school dropout, and he basically gets that day $1.1 billion for his company that made $10 million in revenue. Now, how does that correlate? Because she wanted a site for teenagers, and he has 2 million teenagers coming in every month, growing at 40%. Now, she could have built it, Marissa Myers, who's the head of Yahoo. She could have done that, but it would have taken time, and to get 2 million people to use the site would have cost her a lot of marketing dollars. So they just go out and they buy all this stuff. Now, the other thing that's going to happen in the next 12 months, it's going to bring an enormous amount of money into this valley, is Yahoo owns 24% of a company called Alibaba. Have you ever heard of Alibaba? It's a Chinese company that is the Amazon.com, eBay, and Google of China, all right? They will come public. It has been said that when Mr. Ma brings that company public, he will probably get and have a valuation of $150 billion, which puts it where Apple is day one, and she owns 24% of that. So when you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley, that they're buying 10 to 12 of these companies, these big mamas and papas, every week, that's why you're going to have a sustaining amount of cash and a lot of money. Now here's the way it's going to divide up, and this is the way it's going to be. You're going to have the people that are the employees that basically are there that maybe won't get a lot of stock, but will get something, and they will come over to the areas where for $500,000, $600,000 you get a lovely house and they'll be able to afford it. Then you'll have the people in the middle that will start to look at the $1 million homes because they've gotten $2 or $3 million in stock. And then you have the people that are going to have 10, 20, 30, 40, $500 million, and you know where they're going, to the stratosphere. And you know what? Let me give you the profile of what's coming at you, because I think that's very interesting. You're going to be getting a whole different profile. You will continue to get the first-time buyers, the traditional move-up, and the affluent buyer. That's going to continue. But here's what's coming at you that you don't even have a clue about. There's basically, let's talk at the lower end first, all right? You're still going to get first-time buyers, and let's talk about that a little bit around lending. Lending is easing up, you know now, but we've seen the jumbos come back, we've seen the 80, 10-10s come back and those things, so that's good. The banks are getting a little bit better. But let's talk about what's going to come down the pipe from the regulation side, because that's important, all right? Because of Dodd-Frank, because of the Bureau of Financial Protection, some things will be changing. So let me talk about a couple of things. If you're working with somebody now who has to have an ARM in order to get in an adjustable rate mortgage, you need to try to get them in before the beginning of next year, because ARMs are going to change next year. Let me tell you how they're going to change. Now banks can do ARMs, that's fine, and they can continue to do ARMs, but this Bureau of Financial Protection is going to make them classify the ARMs, either as qualified loans or non-qualified. Now a non-qualified loan, let's say you're the Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, whatever you are, you can make as many non-qualified loans as you want because you're going to keep them on your books. We are not going to buy them or take them for Fannie Freddie. We are not going to let private investors, they won't want them because nobody's going to guarantee them for you. You have all the liability. So give them to anybody you want. If you want somebody with a 300 FICO score, good for you, and keep it. Now, if you want to do a qualified mortgage, that's one that Fannie and Freddie would look at, but here's what it has to do. Let's say that person takes out that loan starting at 2% and it goes to 7% over the term of the loan. The bank has to verify and absolutely be assured and put it in writing for whoever takes that loan on, that they were sure that the borrower, on the day they gave them that loan, could pay that mortgage, not at the beginning interest rate, but at the fully indexed rate, which means at the 7%, not the 2%. And that's a big deal because a lot of people get those loans low to start because that's all they can afford. The second thing is the expense to income ratio, including the mortgage. Now they're about 50%. FHAs can even go to 55%. It's going down to 43%. And the banks cannot charge more than 3% anymore starting next year on fees for ARMs. So believe me, they're going to be pushing 30-year fixed because they can make more money. So if you have somebody with an ARM, and that would be the basically first-time buyers because they want those low rates, maybe you want to get them in now. Let me talk a little bit about what's going to happen with Fannie and Freddie, because when the idiots in Washington get around to it, they will get around to Fannie and Freddie because they've got them up there someplace. I don't know if you read the paper this morning in the Wall Street Journal, but Fannie and Freddie actually paid back the government. Now they've paid them back the $185 billion that we loaned them, so they're doing better under government conservatorship. We know that they want to change it. They either want to get out of it totally over 5 years and get the government out of it and give it back to the private markets, or they want to do a hybrid, which is, okay, we'll make it public companies again, give it back to the private markets outside, and also, though, we'll set up a government agency like the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Lenders, every time they make a loan, will pay a fee into this entity, and that will guarantee the loans. But here's what they're going to do. Here's the things that are important for you to understand. You now have limits on these loans. 417 at the bottom. In some high-end places, they may go occasionally to 625. they're looking at reducing that down to 400,000, not 417, and the height being 525. The other thing that they're looking at is they're saying basically that they only want to do first-time buyers and low to moderate income people. Those are the only loans they're going to take. So let's say that I have a loan at 417 and the bank could give it to Fannie and Freddie, but I make too much income. So they're going to say, well, the number of the dollar loan qualifies, but her income's too high, so we're not taking that loan. Go get it someplace else and give it to a private investor. The other thing is that now they do 8 out of every 10 loans in America. You know that. They take those in, they're guaranteeing that. They want that number to go down to 50%. So that's what's coming in the lending, and that's going to affect, obviously, your first-time buyer. There's something else out there you should know about that was supposed to start October the 15th. It's a good thing. It's called the Back to Work program, and a lot of you should be interested in this and talking to your lenders. If you have somebody that did a foreclosure or a short sale, and they did that basically with the last couple of years, and they can prove that the reason that they lost their home was because they had a reduction in income of 20% or they lost their job, and they are now willing to basically go to some kind of household counseling. If they have tried to basically improve their credit, and if their FICO score has gone up even a little bit, and they're current on their rental payments, they can go to the banks now and get what's called the Back to Work program, at least apply, and they can get a loan, will get to get a new property within 12 months. They don't have to wait the 3, 5 to 7 years. That program was supposed to start October 15th. I don't know if it did because of the slowdown of the government, but the bank should know about that. Your lender affiliates should know about that. So, okay, so now who have we got? You're going to have the first-time buyers that are going to come over here, and they're going to come in droves because they are going to get stock options, a lot of them, and get stock, but it's not going to be $1 gazillion, but enough to get them in to where your price ranges are in these beautiful communities. Then at the lower end also, you're getting all the hedge funds and all the REITs that are coming in. You're getting all the Goldman Sachs now that own 37,000, 40,000 homes across the United States. They take them in lots from the bank of 200, 300 at a time, and then they come in, and the ones they don't like, they cosmetically redo them and then sell them. The ones they like, they rent them, and they'll keep them for 2 or 3 years. So try to get a relationship with property managers, because property managers are the ones that are going to have contact to them, because they're going to be running and taking care of these properties. Now let me talk about who else you have. NAR says the #1 buyers of real estate right now are 35 to 45, 50-year-olds. Those are the echo boomers. You know that. The children of the baby boomers. That's why they're called echo boomers. Now, however, listen what's coming at you. There's a group called millennials, all right? They are 25 to 35-year-olds, and they now made up 28% of everything that was bought in residential real estate in the last year. And Americans Express just did a survey and said within the next 5 years, they will make up probably 30 to 35% of all residential real estate that's going to be bought in the United States. So there you go. Now let me tell you about these millennials. They're collectors, they're young, they basically are people who what they want, they buy. They're willing to pay a premium if they want it, and if they don't want it and they don't like it, they won't buy it. They're opinionated, they move in a herd with their friends, not older people necessarily. It doesn't matter if you've been in the business 1 day or 48 years. If they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't. All of them text and tweet, you understand that, that's how they live. If you want to know where to find them and market to them, put your properties on something called Instagram or Vine, because that's where they are. Now let me tell you something, and this is going to amaze you, and I'm going to tell you 2 stories, and I'm going to actually show you something here. And this is utterly amazing, all right? Because this talks about what's happening in a place called Facebook and in their environment. Now this is amazing. Let me just try to give you an understanding of what these people like. For example, they like environments, whether it's suburban or urban, that are funky, eclectic, trendy, where you have everything within a short radius, where there's yoga and parks, where there's all kinds of night lights, open air markets, fairs, little tiny shops, then the bigger shops too, and the name brands, and where they can live their life like that, because that's what they like. Now listen to this. This just came out of basically the Wall Street Journal, and it talks about Facetown, and it talks about in Facetown how they're building a whole complex for people where they work, they can live. And this is called Facebook's Town. Now, if you remember, and so most of you are too young to remember, there was a place called Levittown, if you remember. And Levittown was basically a place where back east, years and years ago, Levitt, which was a big plant company, built a huge plant. And in that plant, what they did is they also built a bunch of housing all around it, all right? So that was pretty interesting. Well, listen what Facebook is doing. They're doing the same thing, and I want to get this out so you can see it, because it came from basically the Wall Street Journal. This is called Facebook's Company Town. This was in the paper, and let me give you the date, because you might want to look it up, Wall Street Journal. It was in October the, October the 3rd, 2013. Okay, now, let me just tell you about this, because I was down there. This is unbelievable. Let me read this for you so that you'll understand what these people are like. These are all the millennials here. Facebook's sprawling campus in Menlo Park, California is so full of cushy perks that some employees may never want to go home. Soon they'll have that option. The social networking company said this week it is working with a local developer to build a $120 million, 394 rental unit housing community within walking distance of its offices. Called Anton Menlo, the 630,000 square foot rental property will include everything from a sports bar to a doggy daycare center. Now you're going to say, oh my God, that's competition. No, it's not. Because this is for young people who just got out of college, they want to live in the apartments, and as soon as they have kids and everything, everybody there is going to move them out. They don't want screaming babies, okay? So they'll be coming over here to buy houses. Now let me just tell you the amenities that are there, because you will not believe what these young people want, and what the communities that offer this are going to be the ones that are going to really thrive. Now imagine this, you're 25 years old, and this is what they're giving you at Facebook. The first thing is they're going to give you all kinds of on-site cafes, all right? There's going to be like 18 of them there. So you could go from fast food, takeout, to the top of the line where you want a fancy dinner, food trucks going in and out, okay, fine. Then they're going to have all the convenience stores. So you have the grocery, the barber shop, the hair place, the cleaners, anything that you need and anything that you want, that's all going to be there. Then, and I love this, they don't like bars, guys. They like sports pubs or theme pubs. So this is like a themed kind of bar because it does comedy. That's what they like. They don't want to just walk into a bar. That's not their thing. It has to have a theme, okay? So they want that, they're going to have that. They're going to have a bicycle repair shop with on-site storage. Now, why is that important? Because if you go to San Francisco, let me just tell you what's interesting about San Francisco. First of all, you see lots of people on bicycles. But you know what? The people that basically want an automated bicycle, you know what you see a lot of in San Francisco? Mini Coopers. You know the Mini Cooper, the little car that looks like you wound it up like a toy car? They're all running around in Mini Coopers because if they don't want to use a bicycle, that's the automated bicycle. And if they have that, that's what they use. The other extreme is they buy the toy cars. You know the toy cars, the big BMWs, the Mercedes, the Teslas, because they use those and park them all week, and then maybe they use them on a weekend. And if they don't have either one of those, they either use the Mini Cooper or they rent a car on the weekend if they're going away. That's what they do. So imagine a whole bike area with storage on it. They're going to have a pet spa with doggy daycare, pet walking services, and dog park. Now, why is that important? Because I went into what's going to be the doggy daycare center. I got to tell you, I want to live there. Okay. The first thing is you go in and it's all marble in the entry, and there's a receptionist there, and she takes the name of you and your dog. And the first thing that they ask you is, how is your dog feeling today? I don't know, it's a dog, right? Okay. Is it having a good day? Is it having a bad day? Then the first thing is the dog goes into the breakfast area, so that if your dog hasn't eaten, which they probably wouldn't because they're all busy working 24 hours a day, there's a nutritionist there now who has basically put your dog on a program so that when your dog walks in, there's all kinds of different areas for where your dog goes, because some dogs need weight, some are on a diet, some get this, some get that, some are old. Okay. The next place that they go is they go into a calming down TV viewing area. I don't know, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. I don't know if you know this, but there's actually a cable TV station for dogs now, and that's what they watch, because they found out they don't like to watch what human like. It makes them too excited. Okay, then the next thing they do is they go into what's called therapy, all right? And they have a therapist there that's analyzed your dog, and they go through certain procedures. It's like gym for kids, okay? So that they work their muscles and their bones and all of that. Then they go into downtime, which is nap time, all right? And you can either have them with other dogs, or they can have their own enclave in their own environment, all right? Then when they get up from that, there's a swimming pool, so they go into swimming and they have massage. And then they go into social time, which is when all the dogs get together and we all play. I am not kidding you, all right? And in between that, there are people walking dogs and doing everything. Now, that is unbelievable. Can you imagine what that costs? Why is that going to work for them there? Because the dogs are their children. That's why. There is a daycare center there, but nobody mentions it to you, because the people that have kids got to move out because they don't want them there, okay? Now listen what else they're going to have. A resort-inspired pool, spa, and cabana area. And then on the top of this apartment building, there's going to be 3 themed rooftop entertainment decks. One is going to be for live entertainment and music, and basically people that come in and sing and like this with comedy. The middle one is going to be for the arts and the theater. And the one over here is going to be, they're going to bring in like wineries and have wine tastings. They're going to bring in master chefs, and they'll have cooking and all of that. Now wait, it doesn't end there. On a grassy knoll, they're putting up 8 huge screens that are the size, probably 5 times the size of this. And basically they'll have movies every night, so you can just pick the one you want. And if you live there, and you will because you have a badge, they'll know, anytime you walk around at stations, you can get free ice cream, a latte, or coffee on Facebook. Now, do you love that? Now, that's how they live. That's how they're going to start. And you know what? Imagine when they leave then, and they come and find a house. They're going to want to go to young, vibrant, funky, eclectic communities that offer the same thing. Now, I've said before, and this is true, I live in a place called San Mateo, California. I don't know how many of you have been there. Have you all been to San Mateo, California? Okay, great. Well, let me just tell you, I told this to the city council, so you know they got a hit on my life, I know that, because they had a thing out where they wanted people to come because San Mateo has been struggling a bit, and they would like people to come and give suggestions. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is when you start at the beginning of 4th Avenue on San Mateo, and you come to the end, which is 3 blocks, on each corner there are 4 sleep train stores. Now, what the hell do you need with 4 mattress stores in the city? I don't know. How do you buy a mattress? I don't know, but that's the first problem. Then you come down the street, okay, and the biggest thing there are these furniture stores that go in and out of business every 4 months with the people there, you know, waving the flags and waving the banners. And they're not rentals, they're money laundering places. I know that, okay? Now, the biggest name in San Mateo is Noah's Bagel. That's the biggest. That's what we've got there. You want to go to a fancy place and take somebody out and say, boy, we have a lot of good stuff here. We'll go to Noah's Bagels. Not that there's anything wrong with Noah's Bagels, but that's it. You go 7 minutes up to Burlingame, they got Apple, Restoration Hardware, Ralph Lauren, they got everything. So that's the communities that are going to survive because that's what's coming at you, this group. And here's the thing about them. They spend money. Now everybody says to me, but Carole, they'll all go broke. No, they won't, and let me tell you why. In my generation, and this is very true of a lot of you sitting here, you had to start out with nothing. And you had to go out there and earn that first dollar. And then that first dollar had to go and become $2. And you didn't have a pocket of money to basically be your foundation. You had to earn it off your back, and you had to work really hard to live, pay expenses, educate your children, and save some money. Let's fast forward to these 25 to 35-year-olds. Let's assume 25 to 30% of them aren't going to have to start from scratch because their companies are going to get bought out. They're going to get their stocks. They're going to get bonuses. And all of a sudden, they get 100,000, a million, 2 million, 10 million, 20 million, 40 million, and they're 25 or 26 years old. Now they've got the foundation. So they work and they live and they pay for what they want and what they earn. But over here, they put money to work for them. So do you know what? If you have $2 million and you're 25, and you're not an idiot, and you just put it in anything that gives you a decent return, do you realize what you'll have by the time you're 40 or 50? They will always have money. That's the point I'm trying to make. So they will be able to buy that first home, and the move up, and the bigger home, and the vacation home, and that's what they do. And then they're going to go into commercial real estate. Now let me tell you the other thing that's going to be good for you, and there was another article in the paper, and this one talks about basically China. China taps Silicon Valley. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. I'll tell you when this was in the paper. This was in the paper just about yesterday. Okay. This one talks about, this one talks about China, and talks about China, which has always come here, and they've always bought property. But here's been the model. China has usually bought trophy properties. Remember when they bought Pebble Beach and everybody died and said, oh my God, we're going to hell, we gave them part of America. Oh, please. They already own all of America. Forget it. What difference does it make? They're not going to blow us up because they can't. They own it. You know? You don't blow up that which you own. Okay. So now, here's the difference. You are seeing people, not just individuals, coming from China to buy. Watch the title of who buys these properties. They're all LLCs, partnerships, and trusts, which means they're the Chinese government. That's who's buying them, okay? The big boys, the government of China. And here's the new thing that they're doing. They have spent so far this year almost $2 billion just in the San Francisco Bay Area. They said next year that number will be $4 billion. And guess what? They're starting to buy not only the trophy properties, but a lot of distressed properties also. Because what they want is to get the money out. They can see that there's a great return here. Look at the rents where they are. They can cash flow day one. They'll keep them for a while. Once they've appreciated, they'll sell them back to us and we'll pay double what we sold it to them for, because that's the way it usually works. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to tell you is get out of your box. Because you are going to have first time, move up, and the high end. But at the end of the day, you have so many new kinds of clients coming at you, and this valley is not going to run out of money. In fact, my biggest concern is there's too much money, which means things will appreciate too much, and that will price some people out of the market. That's the biggest concern that we have. So at the end of the day, let me tell you where I think it's going. I think that basically it's cooling a bit. I think next year will be great. I think the next 3 years are going to be wonderful. I think real estate is a great asset. But here's what I think. I think you have a complex, fragmented market. So you're going to have areas that will be multi-offer, people paying over premium 30%, no inventory running to get it. Then you're going to have what I call border to the multiple buyers. That means they'll have to go over list, they'll have to go to market, and maybe a little bit more, but maybe not 30%, maybe only 5 or 10. Then you're going to have areas that have stabilized, they've gotten their appreciation this year, they'll have to wait till next year to see a little bit more, and so they're going to kind of be able to sit there, you can negotiate a little bit better. And then I think you have the high end. They buy when they want, they don't. Over here, what's been slow to move is that 1.5 million to 3. I think it's beginning to show a little bit of life, but that's the one I worry about the most, that it may waffle a little bit during the next year. Let me give you 2 stories and then I'll close. You've heard of Mark Zuckerberg, the gentleman that's basically the owner and the founder of Facebook. Well, you know, he owned a house and bought a home in Palo Alto last year, okay? And he paid $3 million for that house, and in Palo Alto, that does not give you the best neighborhood, but it's nice, okay? Now, in the last month, people on either side of him put their houses up for sale. And in marketing, they said, your neighbor could be Mark Zuckerberg. Well, he didn't like that, okay? So guess what he did? I mean, this just shows you the mentality of these young people. He not only went and bought the houses on either side of him, he bought 2 houses on either side of him. He spent $40 million in one day by giving them each $10 million for houses that were listed about 6. And then he offered to rent them back to them because he said to them, my intent isn't to make you move. My intent is I don't want people selling houses based on the fact that I live next door. That same week, he sends his wife to San Francisco because she's now going to look for a house in San Francisco, okay? And the agents did what I would have done. They took her to what we call Billionaires Row, Broadway, Pacific, where Larry Ellison has a house, Mr. Getty, Danielle Steele, the lady that writes all those wonderful love novels, etc. She hated it. She said it was old, it was dated, it was too flamboyant, the houses were too big and bulky and all that. So they started taking her around to the Castro, Noe Valley. You've heard of the Intermission, 16th, 17th Street. Guess what she buys? She buys a house in Liberty Park, which is 2 blocks from Mission Dolores, which is right in the heart of the Intermission. Now, what is the Intermission? Mostly Hispanic. All the tattoos live there. All the Hells Angels live there. Prostitutes, the drug dealers, that's what it's made of. But what is it she liked about it? She said, but it's young, it's funky, it's eclectic, it's on 24 hours a day. You can go to a nice restaurant, a funky restaurant. You can meet people that basically are diverse. You can talk to a prostitute. You can talk to a young kid that's a techie. I can talk to somebody like Mr. Zuckerberg who owns a company like Facebook. She raised the price of real estate there probably 100% in one day. She paid $10 million for a house, goes down and gets a $3 million permit to redo it, and do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? So the old rules of that first time move up, move around, and this is where they went, and these were the areas, and you started here, and you went there, and you went there. Go back to school and figure out, no, they're going to go from here to maybe over there. And it's got to have that ambiance of funky, eclectic, trendy, constantly moving, energetic, and if it doesn't, they're not going there. That's it, okay? So at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to happen. And I think that you have to understand that that's what's coming, because that's where the market is going to be. All right, I talked a long time. I'm going to close with a joke. Now bear with me, okay? This is not meant to be political, but it's sort of revolving around that, but it's pretty cute. Okay. This person dies, and I don't know where you go, wherever you go, so whatever you believe. I'll use heaven, but wherever you think you go when you die, I don't know, okay? And I don't know whether there's a man or a woman there, but let's just say there's somebody there at the gate that gets you in, okay? So you go there, and this person comes, and this person that's there that opens up the gate, and this person goes in and says to them, where's all the people? And he says, well, there are no people when you die. He says, see, all these clocks that are around, there's millions of them, you become a clock when you die, and that's what happens to you. And depending upon how good you were, and if you didn't tell any lies, and if you did good for society and for life, basically then you become a beautiful clock. And see the big beautiful clocks, all gold, and they're hardly even working hard, they keep perfect time, and they're glistening, and they're beautiful. Those are the clocks of the good people. But then see over here, these ones, they're all broken, and they're slashed, and they're ugly, and they're rusted, and they're running around like crazy trying to keep up with time. Those were the bad people. And he said, you know, everybody's got their name under their clock, so walk around and you'll begin to see some people. So this guy starts walking around and he says, God, I gotta go up to this one. This is the most beautiful one there is in here. And he says, oh, no wonder, it's got Mother Teresa's name underneath it. She was that woman that did so much good for everybody. And then he walks around and he says, oh my gosh, Abe Lincoln, not so bad, a little tarnished. He said, well, he told a couple of lies, but he was really good. So he walks around and he's looking at everybody and he says, but you know what I don't notice here? He said, there are no past presidents and no congressmen and no senators. And he says, of course not. They can't be a clock. We use them as ceiling fans to cool down the place because they're spinning so fast from all the lies they've told. Okay, thank you.
Carole, everybody. Round of applause. Thank you so much, Carole. It's always a pleasure to have you. We'll see you again in the first quarter of next year. Excellent. First quarter of next year. All right, community announcements in the